Revan is one of the most fascinating characters in the entire Star Wars universe, and a fan favorite ever since his debut in the Knights of the Old Republic games. He has one of the franchise's most complex and tragic arcs. His life is a roller coaster ride from being the Republic's great Jedi hero to becoming one of the most feared Sith Lords ever and redeeming himself yet again before living for 300 years trapped in a mental prison, as he lingered for centuries beyond a natural human lifespan. In this video, I'm going to look at the entire history of Darth Revan, charting his rise and fall, as well as his role in some of the most notorious wars in Star Wars history. Few beings have had such a profound influence on the fate of the galaxy as Revan, so let's get started. It makes sense to start his story from the very beginning. Knights of the Old Republic 2 states that Revan was believed to be born in the Outer Rim, but there's no record of his homeworld in any legend source. I also want to make it clear that Revan was not his birth name, but rather a name that he would later adopt. In Star Wars: The Old Republic, he says, "It isn't my real name, never was, but it will do." Later I'll talk more about the origins of his name in detail. Meanwhile, in the novel The Old Republic, Revan, it states that he was about 40 years old at the time of these events, which are set in 3954 BBY. This puts his year of birth roughly around 3994, give or take a year or two. As we know from KOTOR and many other Old Republic era sources, Revan was Force sensitive, and eventually the Jedi Order accepted him. There are no stories of him showing unusual power as a youngling, unlike someone like Anakin Skywalker in The Phantom Menace. Nobody could have predicted the role that Revan would play in the Star Wars galaxy. Revan had several primary instructors during his time as a Padawan. The Jedi historian and consular Master Kreia claimed to be his first teacher, although some dispute this. However, it seems that she did have a profound effect on him because Revan's later teachers noted his thirst for knowledge. The Knights of the Old Republic campaign guide reveals that Kreia attempted to uncover the mysteries of the galaxy through meditation. This damaged her eyesight, which she eventually accepted because she didn't believe repairing it would benefit her in any way. Kreia would eventually fall to the dark side and become Darth Traya as part of the Sith Triumvirate, as we see in Knights of the Old Republic 2. We know from Knights of the Old Republic that Revan trained alongside another young human, Alec, on Coruscant, and later at the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine. The experienced Twi'lek Jedi Master Jar Lestin taught both boys and believed that Revan could be a hero of the Order. Both Master Lestin and his fellow Master Vandar Tok'er acknowledged his excellence. However, it's notable that the human Jedi Vrook Lamar had a more pragmatic and cynical view. He was wary of Revan's thirst for knowledge and believed that it could become a problem if the Jedi didn't closely monitor his development. Cue the foreboding music, because he wasn't wrong. Revan studied with many teachers and reportedly trained in unusual disciplines when he was a Padawan, including Force bonds. Put simply, a Force bond was a link through which two Force-sensitive beings could influence each other. They could communicate their feelings and thoughts, and it could improve coordination during battles. This also allowed one of the two beings to enhance the other's strength if they faltered. The Jedi Master Zez Kyle was one of the most knowledgeable about this subject. In Knights of the Old Republic 2, he said, "A bond between two living beings is not something easily broken. It is not a choice. It is like breaking a feeling, like turning away from the Force. To break a bond, your feelings would have to change, or one of you would have to die. But even then, the bond wouldn't go away. It would simply be empty. A wound." Later in life, Darth Revan noted that many Jedi didn't fully form such connections because of their self-discipline and because their strict doctrine forbade them from opening up to the passions of others. Revan would use this technique for both good and evil throughout his long existence. Finally, in 3964, Revan and Alec both achieved the rank of Jedi Knight. Their masters noted their talent, although they believed that Revan would achieve more within the Order. However, there were strong signs that Revan wasn't totally on board with the demands of being a Jedi. The former Jedi hopeful Mikal claimed that Revan returned to Master Kreia because he wanted to learn how to leave the Order. Mikal was an interesting figure because he didn't originally become a full-fledged Jedi for a very simple reason. Unfortunately, by the time he came of age during the Mandalorian Wars, there simply weren't any fit Jedi available to train him. Nonetheless, we know from Knights of the Old Republic 2 that he would become a noted scholar of the Jedi and the Sith before sitting on the Jedi Council. Anyway, getting back on track, it's clear that Revan had some issues with the Jedi, but he opted to stay with the Order. Soon after this, the galaxy erupted into chaos with the outbreak of the Mandalorian Wars. Well, the General has been making additions to his collection for several years now, and if you're anything like me, you've probably imagined what it could be like to own a saber yourself. So that's why I started my own store called Stickman Sabers, with a singular goal in mind. Make sabers that look amazing, being inspired by iconic designs, but specifically built to actually duel with. No worrying about babying them, just pick them up and go ham. They're equipped with state-of-the-art pixel technology, giving off an incredibly bright light that will light up the darkest rooms out there. And obviously have that iconic hum, just feels right the moment you switch it on. And for a limited time, if you pick a collector's saber up, you'll also get 2 combat sabers for free. So, if you ever thought about starting your own collection, this is a pretty good place to start. Links in the description, and now, let's get back to the video. In 3964 BBY, the galaxy experienced a massive conflict again with the beginning of the Mandalorian Wars. The Jedi Order had suffered many scars over the past 2 centuries. Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma's Great Sith War had only ended 20 years earlier, leading to an uneasy calm in the galaxy known as the Restoration Period. Meanwhile, the Third Great Schism was still in living memory for some Jedi, including Vandar Tok'er. That's why the Jedi were extremely reluctant to involve themselves in yet another war. It was relatively easy to ignore in the beginning until the Mandalorians began attacking Outer Rim worlds. We know from Star Wars Insider 80 that the Mandalorian leader, Mandalore the Ultimate, and his lieutenant, Cassus Fett, created a new warrior class as they redefined their culture. These were the Neo-Crusaders who implemented a new, more uniform style of armor. Meanwhile, the Mandalorians evolved from their traditional philosophy of simply fighting and conquering. Now they were beginning to capture and retain the planets they dominated as they began to forge their own empire. It's also notable that the Mandalorians became an increasingly multi-species culture around this time. We know that the original Mandalorians were the Tong, a fearsome simian warrior species who hailed from Coruscant before humans drove them off-world to the planet Rune, before they eventually adopted Mandalore as their new homeworld. The Tong suffered a severe decline when they allied with Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma in the Great Sith Wars. This prompted Mandalore the Ultimate to invite increasing numbers of beings of different species to join the Mandalorian culture, including Twi'leks, Zabraks, Rodians, and Mandalorian giants. Of course, we know that humans would eventually come to dominate Mandalorian society in both canon and legends. The Mandalorians began their invasion carefully, as they caused the Republic to underestimate them. In Knights of the Old Republic, Canderous Ordo describes the early stages of the conflict. He said, "We started by conquering worlds just outside the Republic. We did it quietly so the Republic wouldn't really know what was going on until too late. When we finally did hit the Republic worlds, they had no idea we were coming." The Republic even covered up some of the most extreme Mandalorian actions, such as their genocide of Cathar, which left only a few hundred of the feline species alive. Gradually, the Mandalorians even encroached on Hutt space as they expanded their territory. The Essential Atlas explained that the Hutts hired mercenaries to fight the invaders, but the Mandalorians often simply outbid them and bought their services. Eventually, it appeared as if the Mandalorians were running out of gas and motivation to keep going, but then they suddenly broke out in force. They took several planets, including Onderon, the site of the recent Beast Wars, Duxon, Vanquo, and Taurus. Taurus had only really joined the Republic in controversial circumstances because the city world basically bought its way in through corrupt deals. As I already mentioned, the Jedi didn't do much during this period, refusing to get involved unless absolutely necessary. Some of their order resented this weakness and believed that it was against the very principles of being a Jedi. One of these young Jedi Knights became an increasingly vocal presence as he fearlessly argued that the Order should assist the Republic's military against the Neo-Mandalorians. The Knights of the Old Republic handbook explains how his profile grew, and he became a folk hero with many civilizations referring to him as the Jedi's own crusader. He gradually assembled a following of like-minded Jedi as the Republic suffered increasing numbers of civilian casualties. The ever-loyal Alec was the first of these Jedi to join this cause, and they went to the planet Serja on a scouting mission. However, the Mandalorians ambushed them and captured many of the Jedi. The leader returned to the Jedi Council, who were adamant that the Order had no place in the war, although they did assign him the task of liberating his followers. Their attitude was that he made this mess so he could get them out of it. Eventually, they were successfully liberated, and the Jedi found himself as the head of what came to be known as the Revanchist movement. Of course, this unnamed Jedi was Revan, the subject of this video, and this is how he gained the name by which we know him. For context, Revanchism is a real-world political doctrine that originated in France in the 19th century. The Oxford English Dictionary explains that a revanchist is a person or policy advocating for the recovery of lost territory, status, or authority, usually driven by a desire for revenge following a previous military defeat or humiliation. Revan's message began to resonate after the Cathar massacre. We know from the Knights of the Old Republic comic book series that he was on Cathar with Alec when the Mandalorians committed one of their worst atrocities of the war on Sirocco. The Republic had placed military installations within the cities of the native Starab because they believed the Mandalorians wouldn't attack civilians. A disgusted Mandalore the Ultimate ordered the full-scale nuclear bombardment of the planet, destroying almost every major population center. Revan and Alec felt the disturbance in the Force from several sectors away. The Revanchists became increasingly influential, but the Jedi Council still refused to condone their actions. Several leading masters confronted Revan on Cathar, ordering him to stand down and disband his followers. However, in the middle of the conversation, Revan stooped down and picked up a Mandalorian mask from the ground. Instantly, the entire group of Jedi had a shared vision of the Mandalorian forces wiping out the Cathar. A single Mandalorian crusader attempted to stop them from committing genocide, but her former comrades killed her too. Igniting his purple lightsaber, Revan vowed to wear the mask until every Mandalorian faced justice, and he also adopted his name for the first time. The Council reluctantly agreed to assimilate the Revanchists into the Republic military as a mercy corps under Revan's command. This was a major turning point in the conflict because it quickly became apparent that Revan was a military genius and an inspirational leader. In 3962 BBY, Revan and Alec, who was also using the name of Malak, prevented the Mandalorians from ransacking Duro's strategically crucial shipyards. Around this time, the Jedi Mitra Surik became one of Revan's most trusted confidants. Remember her name because she'll play a huge role in this story later. The Essential Guide to Warfare explains that this key victory prompted the Republic's Supreme Chancellor Tol Kressa to appoint Revan as overall commander of the Republic's armed forces, with the polarizing Jedi directly leading about a third of them. With nothing standing in their way, Revan and Malak began enjoying major victories, but this came at a price. They became increasingly cold and ruthless as they sacrificed territory and resources to gain an edge. The duo matched the Mandalorians' brutality with equally ruthless strategies. This was decidedly un-Jedi behavior, but it was only the beginning of their slow descent toward the dark side. At this point, I want to do a short sidebar on Revan's best friend and sometime apprentice, Alec, who would become the future Darth Malak. Unlike Revan, we know precisely where he came from. Knights of the Old Republic 31 says that he hailed from the village of Squin Quargesmus on the planet Quelli in the Outer Rim. Unfortunately, the Mandalorians ravaged Quelli during the Great Sith Wars, so Alec became a refugee. Eventually, he proved he was Force-sensitive and entered the Jedi Academy on Coruscant. Republic records assigned his village's name as his surname, but his fellow Padawans could barely pronounce it, so he gained the nickname Squint. Alec and Revan became close friends in those early days. Most of this story aligns with what I've already said about Revan, so I won't repeat myself, but it's worth noting the words of Jedi Master Jar Lestin in Knights of the Old Republic. He recalled, "The Jedi Order moved too slowly for Revan and Malak. We were too cautious in their eyes. They always sought to learn far quicker than their masters felt was prudent." Alec was the first Jedi to join Revan's cause during the Mandalorian Wars, and even described his friend as his honorary master. Remember, Revan was still a mere knight himself at this point, so this was extremely unorthodox. Alec also created the persona of Captain Malak after the Jedi Council began their repression of the Revanchists, even attempting to arrest them. He went as far as tattooing his head with blue-gray stripes to hide his true identity. That's quite an extreme step, but he would even go as far as saying that he would use the name Malak until the Mandalorians were defeated. Alec truly was no more. Let's get back to our main narrative now, where Revan and Malak were beginning to flirt dangerously with dark side elements. Little did the galaxy know how much this would eventually cost it, as the Republic's two greatest heroes would eventually become its most feared and despised villains. A couple of years after Revan's staggering rise, he discovered an ancient ruin of the Rakata near the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine. The Rakata were a near-extinct species that enslaved most of the galaxy about 25,000 BBY. They used the Force to travel through hyperspace before the dawn of hyperdrives and established hyperspace lanes. Eventually, their horrendous cruelty actually cost the Rakata dearly because the Force abandoned them. This, combined with the loss of their technological dominance, resulted in the collapse of the Rakatan Infinite Empire, and their few survivors became a scattered, nomadic people deep in the unknown regions. Malak warned Revan that the Jedi Council would likely excommunicate them if they discovered that they had entered the ancient ruin, but Revan refused to be dissuaded. After passing several tests that droid guardians set, he found his way to the central chamber, where he discovered a star map that showed part of the way to one of the most powerful relics of Rakata technology, the Star Forge. We know from Knights of the Old Republic that the Star Forge was seriously bad news, because it was basically a space station that channeled the dark side of the Force to produce unlimited weapons by drawing energy from a nearby star. The automated station could turn out an endless line of droids, ships, and vehicles, but it came at a high price. The Star Forge became an immense tool of dark side power because of the evil nature of the Rakata, and it corrupted its users before eventually consuming and controlling them. To sum up, it's not something that any self-respecting Jedi would ever want to play with. However, matters escalated when Revan uncovered a second star map on Kashyyyk in the Shadowlands. This was the dark ground level of the planet where sunlight couldn't reach through the dense foliage of trees and leaves. It was incredibly dangerous, with the native Wookiees only visiting for ceremonial rites of passage or to enter exile. Revan's fall truly began when he went to the Sith world of Malachor V in 3961 BBY. There he discovered the Traius Academy, a temple of Sith knowledge. Although Malachor V was relatively close to Mandalorian space, the warrior culture treated it as a taboo world. Revan wished to discover why, and he traveled there, but gained more than he bargained for. He discovered the location of the ancient Sith tomb world of Korriban, and the planet's dark side influence corrupted him. Revan constructed a stronghold on Malachor and used the planet's energies to bind his followers to his will, which was not a good sign. In Knights of the Old Republic 2, Darth Sion describes Malachor V and its pernicious influence. He said it's been here for thousands of years. It is a place where Sith teachings run strong. It is the threshold of the borders of an ancient empire. Kreia says that it was a place of reflection for the ancient Sith, a gateway to their lands. It drew Lord Revan, and it calls to her as well. She said that the teachings here will lead one to the Sith, the true Sith, and all their shadowed worlds. This place led Revan to the graveyards of Korriban and beyond. The last detail is important because he uncovered evidence that the Sith Empire existed beyond the boundaries of known space, and remained a serious threat to the galaxy. I'm not talking about Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma's empire, but rather that of the actual Sith race. After Naga Sadow's failed attempt to invade the Republic during the Great Hyperspace War, a new Sith Emperor came to the fore. This was Vitiate, one of the most evil Sith in history, although his subjects simply referred to him as the Emperor. He hailed from the planet Nathema, which he drained of life in a ritual of unspeakable darkness before leading most of the surviving Sith to the hidden world of Dromund Kaas. His ultimate desire was to repeat the same ritual on a galaxy-spanning scale. We know from the novel The Old Republic Revan that Vitiate manipulated Mandalore the Ultimate into invading the Republic because he wanted chaos in the galaxy. Gradually, the darkness seduced Revan, but he didn't fully succumb to the dark side yet, and remained a Jedi. He also brought the ever-loyal Malak into the fold with him in a move that would have devastating consequences for the Republic and the Jedi. Revan and Malak continued bringing the fight to the Mandalorians with battles on Taris, Onderon, and Dixon. The latter was brutal, with 10 Republic soldiers dying for each Mandalorian. Revan also promoted Mitra Surik to general as the war progressed, and she began to have a more significant role. Despite his strategic brilliance, Revan also experienced defeats, including one at the hands of Cassius Fett at Jagga's Cluster. The turning point in the war came in 3960 BBY, when Revan ordered the construction of the Mass Shadow Generator, a super weapon of devastating power. Revan lured the Mandalorians into a trap above Malachor V in what he believed would be the final conflict to end the war. Revan led half of the Republic's forces against Mandalore the Ultimate's flagship. Meanwhile, Meetra Surik led the other half as bait to lure the Mandalorians into range of the Mass Shadow Generator. However, Mandalore the Ultimate added an unexpected twist when he challenged Revan to a duel on his flagship. The Jedi agreed and proceeded to defeat the Mandalorian leader, leaving him on the cusp of death. Before he died, Mandalore removed his mark and told Revan the truth of the origins of the war. He explained that a red-skinned member of the Sith seduced them into attacking the Republic, and that a secret Sith Empire existed in the unknown regions. In the Old Republic Revan, we know that Mandalore gave his conqueror the coordinates of the icy world of Rekiad, where a tomb existed that could guide him towards this empire. Meanwhile, the Republic fleet was overwhelming the Mandalorian forces. That's when Surik ordered the activation of the Mass Shadow Generation. The super weapon created a massive gravity vortex that pulled countless ships from orbit and slammed them into Malachor V's planetary crust, with thousands dying. Some suggest that Revan deliberately exposed some of his allies to the weapon because they were an obstacle to his power, but this isn't confirmed. The Mandalorians unconditionally surrendered, leaving Revan and the Republic victorious. However, the events at Malachor V definitely left psychological scars because so many people died on both sides. Activating super weapons is also not the most Jedi-like behavior. One last note on the Mandalorian surrender: we know that Revan ordered their disarmament, including the confiscation of their lethal basilisk droids. Most significantly, he took Mandalore's mask, the most important symbol of leadership in their culture, equivalent to the Darksaber in the Disney canon. He irrevocably changed their culture, with many future Mandalorians serving as bounty hunters and mercenaries over the following millennia as they sought purpose and harmony with their devotion to combat. As you might expect, the Jedi Council wasn't happy with the act of mass destruction that was done in their name, and they summoned Revan, Malak, and Meetra to face the music. But Revan and Malak said no, packing their bags and taking their remaining loyalist forces to the unknown regions. After Revan and the Republic brutally defeated the Mandalorians, he became fixated on the hidden Sith Lord in the unknown regions. In the Old Republic Revan, he reveals the truth about the secret Emperor's existence to Malak, and the duo agree to pursue him. What's striking at this point is that they talk about stopping the Sith once and for all, so it appears that they didn't see themselves as evil at this point, nor were they fully aware of the insidious nature of the dark side and how it was manipulating their intentions. Malak even suggested killing Meetra Surik because she returned to the Jedi Council to face judgment after activating the Mass Shadow Generator. This action had the incredible effect of leaving her bereft of the Force, and she left the Order in disgrace, becoming known as the Jedi Exile. Revan convinced Malak that killing her wasn't necessary because her life was already destroyed. Then the duo traveled alone to Rekiad, where they discovered a natural icy structure known as the Twin Spears. Inside one was the tomb of the Sith Lord Dramet II. He was the half-brother of the hidden Sith Emperor Vitiate and fled to Rekiad in terror, spending his days there in exile. Revan and Malak found a datachron in his crypt that revealed the location of Nathema, the Sith Emperor's homeworld. This was becoming the worst treasure hunt in the world. Revan also left Mandalore's mask inside the tomb because he didn't want the Mandalorians to recover it. Their next move saw them travel alone again to Nathema, where they realized that the world was completely barren of the Force. There was barely any life on the planet because Vitiate drained it when he performed the malignant ritual that made him immortal. On Nathema, they learnt of the existence of Droman Cass and its location. Originally a dangerous jungle world with vicious predators, the Sith survivors of the Great Hyperspace War arrived on the planet after a 20-year journey in 4980 BBY. The Old Republic game shows that they tamed the treacherous landscape and gradually constructed the city of Cass. Vitiate's dark side experiments and arcane rituals transformed the climate of the planet, and it became overcome by storms with almost impenetrable clouds and lightning. Revan and Malak left their navy behind and traveled to Droman Cass, where they lay low for a while, attempting to gather as much information as possible. But then they made the fateful error that shaped the future of the galaxy. Instead of bringing back the intelligence they gained to the Republic, they arrogantly decided to confront the Sith Emperor himself. This was a bad idea because he was probably the single most powerful individual in the galaxy at this point. They infiltrated the Emperor's citadel with help from a member of the Imperial Guard, but little did they know that the guard, Yari, was manipulating them under the orders of the Emperor himself. In the end, it wasn't even a fight. They entered Vitiate's throne room, where he was ready and waiting for them. He overwhelmed their minds and dominated them, twisting them toward the dark side of the Force until they submitted and became his servants. Revan and Malak, the two most iconic heroes of the Republic, were now officially Sith Lords, with both carrying the title of Darth. Vitiate's next move was to send them back to the Republic with the mission of finding and activating the Starforge ahead of his galactic invasion. All of this takes place before the events of the first Knights of the Old Republic game, which hints at the reasons behind Revan's fall but doesn't fully explain them. I highly recommend checking out the Old Republic Revan because this novel gives all the context you need, and I'll be referencing it often throughout this video. Revan and Malak departed Dromund Kaas and used their existing star maps to locate more on the planets Manan, Tatooine, and Korriban. The new Essential chronology reveals that Revan uncovered more Sith lore and relics when he entered the tomb of Tulak Hord in about 3959 BBY. He removed Horde's ancient mask, which consisted of two pieces that allowed dark side wearers to move in secrecy. Revan and Malak found the next segment of the star map in Naga Sadow's tomb, one of the most notorious Sith Lords in history. Meanwhile, the novel Darth Bane Path of Destruction reveals that Revan made his own secret Sith holocron too, which pondered the dynamics between a master and an apprentice. This would have a profound impact upon Bane when he developed the Rule of Two, affecting generations of Sith over the following millennia. Finally, later that year, Revan and Malak triangulated the data they gathered from the 4 star map pieces and located the Starforge in the Leihan system. They eagerly traveled there in pursuit of the space station, but it didn't go entirely to plan. Their ship crashed into the planet Leihan, and the native Black Rakata tribe captured them. This was a surviving band of Rakata led by a leader known only as the One. The Black Rakata rode Rancors that they discovered on another crashed ship, as they weren't native to Leihan. Rakatan technology at this point was extremely primitive after the fall of their infinite empire, almost countless generations earlier. We know from Knights of the Old Republic that Revan tore their language from the One's mind, so he learned to speak with them. He agreed to steal an ancient tome from a rival tribe known as the Elder or Red Rakata. In return, the Black Rakata would help Revan and Malak gain access to the Temple of the Ancients, a structure that was crucial to entering the Starforge. However, Revan would betray both tribes before eventually entering the temple with Malak and shutting down the disruptor field around Leihan, finally exposing the Starforge. Incredibly, they also managed to free themselves of Vitiate's control, a feat the hidden Sith Emperor never even imagined was possible. Nonetheless, they remained under the influence of the dark side and believed that the mental commands that they embedded in their minds were their own desires. It had also had the effect of suppressing their memories of him, leaving only the vaguest of recollections that he existed. This was extremely significant for the events that were to come, because Malak would never understand the bigger picture. Revan, on the other hand, would always maintain that link with Vitiate, however faint, for better or worse. They then decided that the best thing to do was to create their own Sith Empire, with Darth Revan naming Darth Malak as his Sith apprentice. Meanwhile, they returned to the Republic forces that loyally followed them into the unknown regions and absorbed them into their Imperial Navy. The Old Republic Encyclopedia explains that they used the Starforge to produce more weapons and vehicles, so they rapidly became a powerhouse in the galaxy with the strength to threaten the Republic. Another crucial step was the re-establishment of a Sith Academy on Korriban, possibly the least wholesome world in the entire galaxy. However, for the first time, there was a growing rift between Revan and Malak. Revan studied the Starforge in detail and knew from ancient lore that it had destroyed the Rakatan Empire, so he wisely limited his exposure to it. Malak saw this as a weakness, and gradually his contempt for his former friend and idol grew. But Revan was far wiser than his apprentice and realized that the Starforge was more capable than he had ever comprehended. He experimented on a fragment of the station and realized that it fed on whatever it was given, returning the fundamental building blocks of the universe, including life itself. Unfortunately, the creation of life would not be in abundance over the next few years, because a new galactic conflict was about to erupt, bringing the Jedi Order to its knees. Revan used this fragment to create a new device called the Infinite Engine. Don't forget about this, because I'll be coming back to it much later in the video. In 3959, Darth Revan and Darth Malak led an invasion fleet against the Republic. Players of the original Knights of the Old Republic game will be familiar with these events because they were so catastrophic. First, they targeted the Republic shipyards at Forost. About 3 decades later, a combined force of Mandalorian and Krath raided the shipyards and stole 300 ships. Revan and his navy likewise boosted their fleet by pillaging the exposed Republic base. The Knights of the Old Republic campaign guide explains that Revan declared himself the Dark Lord of the Sith at this point, with Malak his shadow hand. Now, with an enhanced fleet of ships, they had the means to take the fight to the Republic in earnest. What's wild is that not everyone saw Revan and Malak as the bad guys at that point. Many Republic soldiers, naval personnel, and even Jedi recalled their inspiring leadership during the Mandalorian Wars, so they defected to his side. That's how they gained significant territory without firing a shot. However, battles were fought across the galaxy, and eventually Revan's new Sith Empire secured key core worlds, including Corellia and Duro. They did suffer some defeats along the way, but the Essential Atlas says they secured about a third of the galaxy along the way. Long before the invasion, Revan had also commissioned the creation of HK-47, a hunter-killer series assassin droid. The Knights of the Old Republic campaign guide explains that he used Chirka Corporation's HK-24 model as the base, but added his own advanced modifications. Revan still carried some psychological scars after using the mass generator and wanted a more subtle way to eradicate and assassinate his enemies. He dispatched key targets including Republic Senators Mimas Yoon of Corellia and Leyland Dor of Sirocco. Revan didn't want to destroy the entire Republic, but rather to subdue it with his institutions intact. This would give him the platform to rebuild it in his image and the strength to confront the mysterious threat that he vaguely remembered from the unknown regions. HK-47 also played a role in helping Revan locate the Starforge, although he annoyed Malak because he constantly referred to humans as meat bags. Revan showed the dark side didn't destroy his sense of humor because he found this funny. Revan wiped HK-47's memory before each mission as per protocol so he couldn't divulge sensitive information if an enemy captured him. After his successful return, the memories would then be restored. As you may have suggested, tensions were rising between Revan and Malak at this point. Star Wars has a long history of Sith Lords turning on each other, and this partnership was no different. Malak accused his master of being too weak, and the pair dueled, with Revan emerging victorious. He cleaved off Malak's lower jaw, leaving him dependent on a vocabulator for the remainder of his life. It added to his aura, but it left him burning with hatred. The Sith Empire demonstrated its ruthlessness as the war progressed. Malak ordered the bombardment of Telos IV and devastated the planet, rendering it the once lush world toxic and lifeless. They successfully captured Iridonia and another chunk of the Republic fleet before turning their eyes toward Coruscant. But they would never make it that far. The Republic experienced some victories, including the defense of Rhodia, a neutral world and home to the Rhodians, some of the greatest explorers and scouts in the galaxy. The Jedi discovered the Sith's intention to invade and successfully drove off the attackers. After the battle, the Rhodians officially aligned with the Republic before additional victories at Lanik and Mongaza. However, the war would rumble on for another 2 years with the Republic in genuine danger of collapse. Eventually, the Jedi Council convened and created a daring plan to decapitate the Sith Empire by capturing their 2 leaders. The Betrayal of Darth Revan, an RPGA game, reveals their 2-phase strategy. First, they secured data on the Sith fleet at Cernpadal. Then, they took this crucial information and sent a small fleet of Republic warships to engage Revan and Malak's ships. During the battle, a Jedi strike force, including Bastila Shan, an expert in battle meditation, boarded Revan's flagship. This force power made her central to the Republic's military strategies because she made their navy more cohesive in battle. They fought their way past his guards and confronted the Dark Lord on the ship's bridge. Players of Knights of the Old Republic will know what happens next because it was one of the most stunning betrayals in Star Wars history. Malak learned what was happening on Revan's ship and swiftly decided to capitalize on the situation. He ordered his gunners to fire at the bridge to eliminate the Jedi and his former best friend because he wanted to claim the mantle of Dark Lord of the Sith. The assault was devastating and killed almost everyone on the bridge, with 2 exceptions. Unbeknownst to Malak, Revan survived the bombardment, but he was barely conscious. Bastila Shan, the other survivor, was in much better condition. She used the Force to preserve the flicker of life within him and removed his body from the command deck before escaping from the battle. This action also created a near-physical bond between them that would have repercussions for the future of the galaxy. We can also only speculate about her motivation because she could have just left him to die. Perhaps she wanted to simply fulfill her mission, or maybe she believed he was redeemable. Regardless, we know from the game that she brought him to the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine. This is effectively where the events of the Knights of the Old Republic pick up, so the following section of this video will be very familiar. Bastila was the only surviving member of her Jedi Strike Force, and she took the comatose Sith Lord to the Council on Dantooine. She also secretly removed the Mandalorian mask that he had worn since the previous war. The members of the Council had a massive decision on their hands with immense consequences for the entire galaxy. It was time to decide what to do with Revan. Ultimately, they opted to wipe his memory so that he would live as a new person. His artificial identity was that of a Republic soldier from the planet Duralia. This was a risky but tactical decision because the Council wanted to take advantage of Bastila's bond with Revan. They decided to keep him close to her so she could draw out his memories over time to learn the source of the Sith fleet and how to defeat Darth Malak. At this point, they didn't know of the Starforge's existence, so the Sith production line remained a mystery. Basically, he became an unwitting living map to the Starforge. It's also worth noting that some of the Jedi wanted to essentially reprogram on moral reasons. They didn't believe that he was pure evil, but rather his fall came from desperation and corruption sustained during the Mandalorian Wars. They wanted to give him a second chance to reaffirm his relationship with the light side of the Force, potentially giving him the pathway to become a Jedi again. Meanwhile, they recognized that he was an outstanding military strategist, which would make him a very dangerous weapon against the Sith if they could use him properly. We know from Knights of the Old Republic that Bastila Shan took command of the Endar Spire, a Hammerhead-class cruiser, as the war progressed. Revan served on board the ship alongside his bunkmate Trask Olgo. In 3956 BBY, their ship came under attack by Darth Malak above Taris. He relentlessly pursued Bastila because he was captivated by her battle meditation skills and how she survived the encounter with Revan, whom he believed was dead. At this point, Malak had also taken his own apprentice, Darth Bandon. Malak had already corrupted many Jedi, but Bandon's thirst for power made him the standout candidate in Malak's twisted eyes, and he became the new Dark Lord of the Sith's shadow hand. The ambush above Taris almost succeeded, with Sith troopers boarding the Endar Spire, but Revan and Captain Carth Onasi successfully escaped, although Olgo lost his life. They escaped to the surface of Taris in an escape pod, but the collision knocked Revan into unconsciousness, and he experienced restless dreams. Onasi dragged him to an abandoned apartment in the upper city, where they recovered. Finally, Revan came to, and Onasi explained his belief that Bastila had also made it off the Endar Spire, and that it was their duty to find her. Onasi believed that most of the escape pods landed in Taris's notorious Undercity. They quickly began their search for Bastila, but encountered a couple of ruthless Sith patrols along the way. After defending an Aqualish black market dealer for some Sith guards, they obtained Sith armor, which allowed them into the lower city without any questions. I'm not going to take you through every mission of Knights of the Old Republic. It's enough to say that they gathered several team members on Taris, including the Twi'lek mission Val and her trusted Wookiee companion Zalbar. Zalbar would eventually pledge a life debt to Revan after he rescued the Wookiee from Gamorrean slavers. Their journey forced them into contact with the Hidden Becks and the Black Vulcar gangs before they finally made it to the Undercity. This was where the Black Vulcars had their base, and their leader, Brejik, kept the captured Bastila as a slave. Brejik intended to offer as a prize to the winner of the Tarisian Season Open a major swoop race which Revan would go on to win under the sponsorship of the Hidden Becks. This infuriated Brejik, who quickly realized that Bastila was a Jedi, and a firefight broke out. Finally, they escaped back to the Upper City, where they reunited with Onasi. The next phase was to escape from Taris, which was under blockade. Only vessels with the correct codes could leave the planet. A significant moment in galactic history occurred when a Twi'lek messenger approached Revan with a message from Canderous Ordo, a Mandalorian who also wanted to get off-world. Revan's antics during the race and the bloody aftermath impressed him, and he believed that their interests aligned. Ordo offered to provide a ship if Revan and his team could secure the departure codes for the Sith military base. Along the way, the team obtained T-3M4, an astromech droid, to help access the sensitive areas of the base and to open locked doors. Revan defeated the Tarisian Sith governor and stole the codes. Their next move was to steal the Ebon Hawk, the personal ship of exchange crime lord Davik Kang, before fleeing the planet. Ordo tricked Kang into believing that Revan was a potential recruit before their entire team boarded the Hawk and left the city behind. Their timing was perfect because Taris came under bombardment from the Sith blockade. Darth Malak believed that Bastila was still on Taris, so he ordered the planet's destruction from space. The obliteration effectively scoured Taris of life, killing billions of citizens, although the Old Republic Codex explains that the ecosystem did eventually recover and life returned. This was also morbidly fascinating because it showed the clear difference between Revan's subtlety and Malak's penchant for brute force. It's fair to assume that Revan would have sent an elite Sith strike force to target Bastila rather than destroy one of the galaxy's economic powerhouses over one Jedi. Yes, she's powerful, but that also shows Malak's insecurity compared to his old master. After evading Sith interceptors, the traumatized crew of the Ebon Hawk agreed to return Bastila to the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine. One notable aspect of Revan's time on Taris was his recurring visions of Bastila fighting an unknown Sith Lord in a lightsaber battle. What he didn't realize was that this was his past self before his memory wipe. He discussed it with Bastila because, of course, he had no context for what was happening, and just thought that they were weird dreams. When they landed on Dantooine, Bastila asked her companions to remain on board the Ebon Hawk while she spoke with the Enclave's Jedi Council. Just a sidebar on the Jedi Enclave, the new Essential chronology states that it existed since 3997 BBY, when Master Voto Siask Bosk constructed a new training center. Siask Bosk was the former master of Exar Kun, who would become a self-proclaimed Dark Lord of the Sith. Eventually, the Jedi High Council on Coruscant appointed a satellite council of 4 masters on Dantooine to oversee its needs and ensure the students followed the Jedi Code. The Academy flourished and produced many Jedi, including the 5 Padawans who would play a role in one of the Order's darkest hours, the Padawan Massacre. That event took place on Taris and had a crucial impact on the Jedi response during the Mandalorian War. Eventually, Bastila returned with a request from the Jedi Council to speak with Revan. Master Jar Lestin greeted him when he entered their chambers, although the Council maintained the facade of pretending not to recognize him. They offered to train him as a Jedi Padawan because they recognized his Force potential. Of course, everybody present except Revan knew that he was probably the most powerful being on the planet. There was a massive risk in training him as a Jedi because they feared they were opening the door for the return of the Dark Lord of the Sith. But inaction could lead to the same result if his memories continued to resurface. It was better that they teach him to control his powers and direct his powers. Master Vondar Tokair also noted that Bastila and Revan appeared to have a shared destiny. They had the same dream about Darth Malak and another Sith Lord entering ancient ruins on Dantooine. After Revan completed his Jedi training at an astonishingly fast pace, he underwent the Jedi trials and built his new lightsaber. Then, after several side quests, including the redemption of the Cathar Jedi Juhani and the defeat of the Mandalorian Chief Sherrick, they ventured into Dantooine's ancient ruins. Only this time, Revan had the Jedi Council's permission. A droid greeted Revan and Bastila inside the ruins and informed them that they were 20,000 years old, and a monument to the builders that would lead the way to the Starforge. The builders that the droid referred to were the Rakata, which is interesting because it suggests that other beings built the temple as a shrine to them. The droid also explained that the monument contained many secrets, but that to obtain them, they must first overcome its many potentially lethal tests. Long story short, they did, and eventually came across a star map that was reeking of dark side energy. This was the same star map that Revan and Malak had found years earlier on the quest to find the Starforge. Revan and Bastila noted that the map pointed to other potential star map locations on Korriban, Kashyyyk, Tatooine, and Manaan. After consulting with the Jedi Council, they agreed that Shan and Revan should locate the remaining data. However, not long after they departed Dantooine, they received a horrifying message on the Ebon Hawk. Darth Malak believed that the Jedi were hiding information relating to the Starforge on Dantooine, and it's hinted that he suspected Revan was alive. He repeated his favorite trick of unleashing a massive orbital bombardment, leveling the Jedi Enclave and killing most of the inhabitants. Meanwhile, the Sith stole many Jedi holocrons that revealed further information about other hidden academies. I'm gonna fly through the remainder of Revan's star map treasure hunt. On Tatooine, he would slay a Krayt Dragon in the Dune Sea and several Dark Jedi in Anchorhead. Revan would also unwittingly reunite with his old assassin droid, HK-47, who joined their crew. Their adventures on Kashyyyk saw them encounter the blind Jedi Jolee Bindo, who joined their team, and they defeated the giant Terran Tadak known as the Great Beast. Revan uncovered a 29,000-year-old Rakata terraforming machine that confirmed he had visited the site 5 years before and revealed the planet's star map. He killed the Malak's apprentice, Darth Bandon, on Manan before locating another star map on the ocean floor. This only left Korriban as the site of the final star map. However, this would also be the most dangerous location for obvious reasons. However, before they made it to the Sith Tomb World, an interdictor cruiser intercepted them and caught them in a tractor beam. This was Admiral Saul Karat's flagship, the Leviathan. After capturing the crew of the Ebon Hawk, he ordered his crew to imprison Revan, Bastilla, and Onasi in forced cages, submitting them to severe torture as they awaited Darth Malak's arrival. Ultimately, their crewmates rescued them, and they fought their way to freedom, even defeating Admiral Karath on the bridge. But the spiteful Karath refused to die quietly as he revealed Revan's true identity to Onasi and Bastilla with his last words. Obviously, Bastilla already knew this, but it enraged Onasi, who couldn't believe that his loyal friend was the Republic's worst enemy. There was the slight distraction of Darth Malak himself arriving on the scene and enjoying a reunion with his old master. Bastilla stunned Revan when she confirmed that he was the former Sith Lord and explained why the Jedi wiped his memory. He replied that he understood and forgave her for the deception, understanding that it was in the best interest of the galaxy. Bastilla and Revan's relationship had been growing increasingly intimate on an emotional level during their travels together. She recognized that she would likely fall to the dark side too if he succumbed to it because of their intertwined fates. Anyway, this wasn't the reaction that Malak was expecting, and he ignited his lightsaber in rage. They had a short lightsaber duel with Malak, driving him back before his old friend froze him in place with force stasis. Luckily, Onasi and Bastilla rescued him, but the drama wasn't over. Bastilla bravely instructed the others to flee as she held the line against Malak, who defeated and captured her before taking her to Lehan, where he tried to submit her to the dark side. The next stage of their journey took them to Korriban in pursuit of the final piece of the star map. They landed in Dreshte, the planet's only settlement that we know rose to prominence under Revan's tenure as Dark Lord of the Sith. He had multiple encounters with Sith acolytes, gradually earning some of their trust and even turning several back to the light. One of these included Karth Onasi's son Dustil, who left the Sith Academy after they revealed the Sith's true nature. They explored the Valley of the Dark Lord, with Revan exploring several tombs, including those of the Sith Lords Adjun Tapal and Tulak Hord, before entering Marka Ragnos' sarcophagus. Ragnos was one of the most powerful Sith Lords in history, ruling the Empire for over a century up to 5000 BBY. Most Sith regard this as a golden age because he consolidated power after centuries of petty squabbling. In 5100 BBY, a 13-year-old boy named Tenebrae petitioned Ragnos to become his apprentice after murdering his father and committing genocide across the planet Madrias. Something about the youngster impressed the Dark Lord of the Sith, so he renamed him Vitiate and granted him Madrias as his fiefdom. Vitiate would rename the planet Nathema before wiping out all life on it. The Old Republic Revan explains that this was the origin story of the hidden Sith Emperor, who ultimately became one of the most manipulative and powerful figures in the galaxy. Revan's final venture on Korriban took him into the tomb of Naga Sadow, where he finally located the last piece of the star map. After leaving the crypt, Revan fought the Sith Master Uthar Wynn and several other members of the Academy before fleeing back to Dreshte and the Ebon Hawk. After using the star map's coordinates, the Ebon Hawk flew to the Rakata Prime system, where they immediately spotted the Starforge. It was drawing power from the system's sun and had a massive Sith fleet around it for protection. Revan sent the coordinates to Republic Admiral Forn Dodonna, a confirmed distant ancestor of General Jan Dodonna in the Legends continuity. However, the Ebon Hawk became caught in a disruptor field, which forced Onasi to land the ship on an island on the surface of Lehon, although they didn't know the planet's identity at the time. They realized that the source of the disruption was a large temple in the distance, so Revan and Bastila set out to investigate it. However, a group of black-robed Rakata ambushed them, and they faced wild rancors along the way. Eventually, they came to another settlement of Rakata, which didn't instantly attack Revan. It emerged these were the Elders, who encountered Revan 3 years earlier. He had promised to destroy the Starforge, but betrayed their trust. This time, he promised to do the job properly, and eventually earned their trust by rescuing a member of their tribe. Eventually, Revan was able to enter the Temple of the Ancients and with his fellow Jedi, Bindo and Juhani, who had joined his crew. Together, they defeated many Dark Jedi and Sith troopers before the most shocking confrontation of all. Malak was successful in his efforts to twist Bastila Shan, and she replaced Darth Bandon as his apprentice. Now she stood in Revan's way with a red lightsaber and engaged the trio in a duel. However, despite her powers, she was no match for their combined force, and Revan's display of strength convinced her that he should be the Dark Lord of the Sith. The corrupted Bastila tried to manipulate him by reminding him of what the Jedi Council did. This forced Revan to grapple with the darkness in his heart, but he was strong enough to overcome it. Then Bastila said that she could sense his thoughts through the Force link, binding them. But Revan rocked her when he said it was more than this, it was love. Bastila rejected him and said that the desire for power was the only feeling they shared. She offered herself to him in her entirety, saying that she would be utterly yours, and invited him to reclaim his empire. Together, they could overthrow Malak and rule the entire galaxy. There are moments in Star Wars history where everything is on a knife edge. This is up there with Luke Skywalker rejecting Darth Vader's invitation to rule the galaxy as father and son. Revan refused to rejoin the dark side, so Shan fled to her fighter and retreated to the Starforge, where the final battle would take place. Meanwhile, the 3 Jedi returned to the Ebon Hawk, where Bindo reminded Revan of his bond with Shan and that there was still hope of bringing her back to the light. Then they contacted Admiral Dodonna to inform her that Bastila was using her battle meditation powers to direct the Sith fleet. All focus now was on destroying the Starforge. The Republic granted the Ebon Hawk an escort of Arak-class strike fighters as it attempted to get close enough to board the Starforge. Battle raged around them, with Republic forces coming under severe pressure. Eventually, the Ebon Hawk finally landed within the enemy station, but only after another detachment of Jedi had boarded. As Revan and his crew passed through the Starforge, they encountered Jedi fighting Dark Jedi, with many fallen around them. Malak recognized the threat and ordered the station's droids and defenses to impede them, even though he knew they wouldn't be able to stop Revan. Finally, he ordered Bastila into combat against Revan and her former crewmates for the second time. Revan defeated a pair of Dark Jedi who were guarding the entrance to the command center, but then he became separated from his companions, and this forced him to face Bastila alone. During their duel, she drew on the power of the Starforge, but was still unable to defeat him. Finally, she begged him to kill her, but he refused and brought her back to the light by using the Force bond and the genuine spark of love that existed between them. Bastila left the dark side of the Force behind her and confessed her own love for Revan. Then she turned her battle meditation powers against the Sith and revived the ailing Republic forces. Admiral Dodonna spotted an opportunity and sent Green and Red squadrons into the breach as the Sith forces inexplicably diverged. On the Starforge, Revan was able to move forward to confront his former apprentice in an epic showdown. When Revan encountered Malak, the Sith Lord was engaging in combat with a pair of Jedi prisoners. He killed them both before confronting his best friend, sending a squadron of battle droids against him before retreating to the Starforge's observation deck. Malak was in a bind because he knew that Revan's power had increased, and he wasn't confident he could defeat him. After Revan followed him, Malak proclaimed that he wanted to suppress Revan and mold him into his apprentice because his skills were even more useful than Bastila's battle meditation. But Revan refused to join the dark side again. Malak feared that Revan was too strong and would eventually betray him, so the pair finally began their last lightsaber duel. Throughout their battle, Malak used the bodies of 8 Jedi from Dantooine's Jedi Enclave to replenish his vitality. Revan was able to set some of them free, allowing them to become one with the Force and preventing Malak from completing the twisted ritual of absorbing their essence. Finally, Revan overwhelmed Malak, striking the mortal blow that brought him to his knees. In his dying monologue, the evil Sith Lord made a poignant observation. He wondered how it would have turned out if he had been the one to return to the light, and noted that it was Revan who ultimately led him down the path of darkness. Malak observed that perhaps there was more truth to the Jedi Code than he had previously realized, and that it was up to him to take responsibility for his actions. His final words showed his enhanced self-awareness because he said, "As the darkness takes me, I am nothing." There's no excusing the evil acts of mass genocide that he committed, but at least he was able to die without hatred in his heart. Ultimately, fire consumed his body as the Starforge burned around him. Revan, Bastila, and the other crew members of the Ebon Hawk escaped in the nick of time before the Republic destroyed the Starforge. The aftermath of the battle saw the surviving Jedi and Republic forces gather on Lahan in celebration. Revan, Bastila, and their allies on the Ebon Hawk all received the Cross of Glory in honor of their bravery. Master Tokair also described Revan as the Jedi's prodigal knight. With the Sith's primary factory destroyed and their leadership decapitated, they quickly scattered across the galaxy into hiding. The next stage of Revan's life was probably the most satisfying, even if it was all too short. After the Republic victory at Rakata Prime, he decided to crush the remnants of the Sith on Korriban, driving them from the ancient Tomb World. This takes us past the events of Knights of the Old Republic and into the territory that the novel Old Republic Revan covers in more detail. After this success, Revan finally had some time to himself. He married Bastila Shan, with the two partying so hard that Revan had a hangover that lasted for several days. This is one of my favorite details in the entire history of Star Wars. However, while they were in love, there was still some trouble in paradise. Tension began to grow between the powerful couple and the Jedi Order for a couple of reasons. Firstly, their wedding went against the Jedi Code, but the Council eventually decided to tolerate it. Meanwhile, the Jedi Council also wanted Revan to take a master to retrain him in the Jedi ways. However, the former Dark Lord of the Sith and Jedi Knight reasonably pointed out that his knowledge of the Force probably exceeded that of anyone else in the Order. This threatened the Jedi, who were reasonably worried about what Revan could do if they didn't control him. Revan and Bastila believed that their relationship gave them strength, and was responsible for bringing both of them back from the brink of self-destruction. One of the most noteworthy moments came when Revan offered to share his expanded knowledge of the Force with the Jedi, but they reacted with absolute horror. His intentions were positive, but some of the Council even advocated expelling him from the Jedi for mentioning it. However, the majority of the Jedi saw sense and knew that his profile was too big for them to cast him out. Instead, they made a quiet arrangement with the happy couple. The Jedi wouldn't speak out against their marriage if Revan agreed not to spread his new philosophy amongst the Order. Ultimately, Revan agreed, although he probably wouldn't have if he were younger. Bastila's initial reaction was fury, but Revan calmed her, and finally they accepted the deal before 2 quiet years of peace. It would be nice to say that's the end of this story and that they all lived happily ever after, but this is Star Wars, and we all know that even though there are many joyous moments, there's always darkness around the corner. We know from the Old Republic Revan that after a couple of years in 3954 BBY, he began experiencing severe nightmares. He saw visions of a storm-covered world in the presence of an all-consuming darkness. After 3 nights of recurring dreams, he finally discussed them with Bastila with no resolution. The next day, he contacted his old crew member Canderous Ordo at the dealer's den, where the Mandalorian was receiving a private dance from a Twi'lek courtesan. They discussed the Mandalorian Wars because Revan was interested in why Mandalore the Ultimate invaded the Republic. He currently believed that there was some other power behind the Mandalorians' boldness. Ordo agreed to investigate on Revan's behalf by discussing the war with some of his old Mandalorian comrades. His next step was to try to contact another old friend, Mitra Surik. You may remember that she was the Jedi who activated the mass shadow generator on his orders, wiping out the Mandalorian fleet and many Republic ships alongside it. The Force left her after this aberration, and she became known as the Jedi Exile. That's also why Revan was unable to trace or contact her. In the next month, Ordo returned to Revan with some fascinating news that he refused to share unless his friend promised not to tell the Jedi. When Revan agreed, Ordo informed him that the Mandalorian clans were searching for Mandalore's mask on Rekiad. This triggered Revan's lost memories, and he recalled that he left the mask there to keep it from his old enemies. The prodigal Jedi suggested that they should be on Rekiad when the Mandalorians inevitably located the mask. Ordo agreed and suggested that they reunite the crew of the Ebon Hawk, but Revan disagreed because most of their old friends were getting on with life. In the end, they only took T3M4 with them, even leaving HK-47 behind because of his violent tendencies. However, he did want to locate Mitra Surik because he believed their shared history would make her a valuable asset. And now for possibly the most heartbreaking part of this story, Revan went home to Bastila, eager to share his news. But his wife had news of her own. She was pregnant. This unsurprisingly rocked Revan, who planned to bring Bastila with him on the journey, but now this was out of the question. He was also surprised because until that point, he hadn't sensed the Force signature of his child. Bastila was furious, and when he told her of his plan to go to Rekiad to investigate his visions, he eventually persuaded her to let him go. They had one final night together in their apartment on Coruscant before parting ways forever. In 3954 BBY, Bastila gave birth to their son Vanner Shan. The Star Wars Galactic Files explain how she eventually fled with him to safety after the rise of the Sith Triumvirate and their purge of the Jedi. Fortunately, they survived this horrifying period in galactic history, although she would always miss her husband. Revan, Ordo, and T3M4 flew the Ebon Hawk to Rekiad, but suffered damage on the descent to the icy planet. They approached the camp of Clan Ordo, where Canderous reunited with his kinsman and his wife Vila. Initially, the Mandalorians were suspicious of Revan, but he surprised them by speaking in their language, and they drank heavily together that night. A couple of days later, they clashed with Clan Gendry, a rival group of Mandalorians. It's notable that both groups still had basilisk droids, despite Revan's earlier attempt to seize them from Mandalorian control. Eventually, their journey took them into the First Spear, the tomb of Lord Drameth II, half-brother to Emperor Vitiate. Revan experienced multiple flashbacks along the way as he recalled the Battle of Malachor and his duel with Mandalore the Ultimate. He also experienced memories of exploring Rekiad with Malak as they searched the planet for proof that the Sith manipulated Mandalore. After finally reaching the sarcophagus, Revan, Ordo, and Vila retrieved two relics, Mandalore's mask and a datachron. It's worth noting at this point that Vila knew Revan's true identity and trusted him as much as a Rancor and a Bantha Pen. Ultimately, she ordered Canderous to choose between his loyalty to Revan and her. He refused to pick a side, and Vila's Mandalorians attacked. The short battle ended with Canderous shooting his wife through the heart. There really aren't many happy relationships in Star Wars. Anyway, Revan convinced Canderous to tell the other members of Clan Ordo that another group of Mandalorians had attacked his kinsman. He also fully remembered what Mandalore told him about the Sith manipulating his people, and he explained this to Canderous. Then he persuaded him to wear the Mask of Mandalore and the title that came with it. Canderous reluctantly agreed and would take the title of Mandalore the Preserver. The Knights of the Old Republic campaign guide explains that Canderous reinforced his claim when he met a dying Tong who claimed to be the true Mandalore. This Tong said that Mandalore the Ultimate was a mere pretender, and before passing away, he gave Ordo his armor. Ordo would make Onderon's Moon Dixon his base of operations and begin a lifelong mission to reunite the Mandalorian clans. After leaving the Spear, Revan and Ordo returned to Clan Ordo's camp before parting ways for the final time. The datachron that Revan discovered mentioned the planet Nathema, so this was his next destination. When he arrived in the system, in the Ebon Hawk, he suffered a rush of memories that physically overwhelmed him. He knew conclusively that he had been here before, and that the planet was an anomaly because it was without the Force. But Revan didn't have long to ponder this because T3M4 alerted him to the presence of another ship. His rush of memories left him groggy and slow to react. This proved extremely costly because it was from the hidden Sith Empire. It held two powerful Sith Lords, Darth Nihilus and Lord Scourge, who fired an ion blast at the Ebon Hawk, disabling it. The Hawk found itself caught in Nathema's gravity and made a crash landing on the planet's surface, colliding with a building in a former city. This was extremely bad news for Revan because Nihilus was a member of the Sith Emperor's Dark Council. We know from the Old Republic game that she was also part of a secret plot against Vitiate because she knew of his master plan to perform a ritual to drain all life from the galaxy. Meanwhile, Lord Scourge is one of the most devious characters in Star Wars history. A pure-blood Sith, he gained a reputation for his immense power after suppressing a series of rebellions in 3956 BBY. The Emperor assigned him to assist Nihilus in uncovering assassination attempts made against her. Little did the Emperor know that Nihilus set it up herself so that it would appear that he still had loyalty. Eventually, Nyrus attempted to recruit Scourge to join her plot against the Emperor. She brilliantly manipulated the situation so that he would either agree to participate, or in the worst case, remain silent because he was now implicated in the plot. The Old Republic Revan explains how Nyrus revealed the truth of Vitiate's past on Nathema and how he obliterated life on the planet. She planned to bring him to the dead Sith world to prove that he committed this horrendous atrocity and the threat he represented to the rest of the galaxy. Unfortunately for Revan, he picked the wrong time to visit the Emperor's homeworld. They were actually leaving Nathema when Revan and T3M4 arrived in the system. Despite being pawns of the dark side of the Force, both Scourge and Nyrus felt absolute disgust for what happened on the planet. They even lost their ability to feel and use the Force during their short time on the world. After shooting down the Ebonhawk, the Sith followed it back to Nathema's surface. Scourge discovered an unconscious Revan in the cockpit and was stunned to spot his lightsaber. Nyrus, a member of the Dark Council who was responsible for most of the Sith Empire's administration, recognized him as Revan. She recalled his visit to Dromund Kaas with Malak many years before. However, the Dark Council didn't know about their fall to the dark side, and instead believed that Vitiate simply killed them. Believing that Revan must have been secretly under the Emperor's control, the two Sith took him prisoner. Nyrus and Scourge brought Revan back to Dromund Kaas, where they imprisoned him in the Dark Councilor's stronghold. The Sith pumped him full of drugs to dull his connection, because the last thing they wanted was for the Emperor to sense his presence. Obviously, they didn't want Revan escaping either. Nyrus's main motivation was to uncover how Revan managed to escape the Emperor's mental domination. However, Revan initially successfully resisted their interrogations, causing Nyrus to lose interest in him after about 6 months. She believed that they would never break him, but Revan became Scourge's obsession. Over the next 3 years, Scourge eventually tortured him enough to extract Revan's memories, and he became fascinated by Revan's philosophy. Over time, their dynamics shifted as they became objects of interest to each other. Revan lost hope of Bastila or Canderous Ordo rescuing him, but he simultaneously gradually gained immunity to some of the drugs. He regained a faint connection to the Force, but it wasn't powerful enough for him to escape. After a couple of years, Scourge divulged Nyrus's name and also revealed that they didn't align with the Emperor's grand plans. Gradually, they even began to trust each other, as Revan insisted he would eventually be free. Meanwhile, Revan began engaging in intense Force meditation as he tried to reach out to Bastila. Instead, he saw the face of his old lieutenant, Mitra Surik, and developed the unshakable belief that she was coming to rescue him. Dromund Kaas was extremely isolated in the Outer Rim, an area of space that the Republic hadn't fully explored at this point. So what was going on in the rest of the galaxy while Revan was Darth Nyrus's guest? The Sith triumvirate of Darth Nihilus, Darth Traya, and Darth Sion began their onslaught against the Jedi in the Dark Wars. In Knights of the Old Republic 2, Surik played a crucial role in defeating the Sith and reclaimed the Ebonhawk along the way. All of that is worth another video, so let's jump forward to Surik's final duel with Darth Kreia. As I mentioned much earlier in this video, Traya was originally the Jedi Master Kreia, who proclaimed herself to be Revan's original teacher, as well as Surik's former master. After Surik defeated her, Kreia said that she was greater than anyone else she had trained. She also said you must go where Revan did, into the unknown regions, where the Sith, the true Sith, wait in the dark for the great war that comes. After the battle, she returned to Dantooine and retrained as a Jedi after she was accepted back into the Order. Meanwhile, the ever-loyal T3M4 shared that he was carrying information about Revan's fate all along. He refused to show it to anyone except Bastila, so Surik agreed to take him to her on Coruscant. Together, Mitra and Bastila watched a hologram recording of the Ebonhawk's crash on Nathema before a pureblood Sith male captured Revan. Mitra was at a crossroads in her life because she wanted to be a Jedi, but she remained deeply unpopular amongst many of the surviving members of the Ravaged Order. She resolved to make it her mission to rescue Revan from the Sith. Before leaving, Bastila gave Mitra the mask that Revan wore throughout the Mandalorian Wars, and as a Sith Lord in the hope that it would spur his memories. You might ask why Bastila didn't go after her husband. Don't forget she still had their kid to look after. Going to the Sith homeworld with an infant probably isn't going to win you any Parent of the Year awards. As Revan predicted, Mitra appeared on Dromund Kaas after retracing his trail to Nathema. It helped that she had T3M4 and the Ebonhawk to help her after the little astromech repaired the ship before making his way back to the Republic. Finally, Surik reached Dromund Kaas, where she posed as a mercenary as she sought to uncover the truth of what happened to Revan. She investigated Lord Scourge after recognizing him from T3M4's recording. Eventually, she made contact with the Sith Lord and revealed her long relationship with Revan. This obviously stunned Scourge, who agreed to help her free Revan. He also revealed Nyrus' plot against the Emperor. Posing as Scourge's servant, Mitra infiltrated the Nyrus Citadel with Scourge as the Emperor's Imperial Guard launched an assault. Vitiate suspected that there was a plot against him and decided to purge the entire Dark Council. Revan escaped during the chaos and reunited with Mitra and Scourge, although he was still under the influence of the drug cocktail that inhibited his powers. Scourge gave him the antidote while Mitra handed him his old mask, and suddenly a flood of memories overwhelmed him. They would duel with Darth Nyrus and slay her before finally fleeing her citadel. The next step was to confront the Emperor himself. Before doing this, they regrouped in the cave where Scourge and Mitra first encountered each other. Mitra shared a hologram with Revan of his wife Bastila and the young son that he had never met. If you've read the Old Republic Revan, you'll know that this is one of the most emotional moments in the entire Legends continuity. Scourge informed them that the Emperor had killed all 12 members of the Dark Council and declared martial law. There were riots taking place all over Kas City, the biggest metropolis on Dromund Kaas. They recognized that this could be a good opportunity to exploit the chaos and attack the Emperor while he was distracted. But equally, they recognized that he was in a ruthless mood, so they had to act quickly. Revan and his companions feared that he would attempt to perform the same ritual on Dromund Kaas that he had previously used to drain Nathema. Revan decided that he was willing to die if it meant bringing down the Emperor, because he presented such a huge existential threat to every living being in the galaxy. Little did he know that he would meet a fate worse than this very soon. After making their way to the Emperor's citadel, they infiltrated it with relative ease thanks to Lord Scourge. However, eventually Yari, the guard who previously betrayed Revan and Malak to the Emperor, recognized the Jedi Master's mask, and a fight erupted. Revan, Mitra, Scourge, and T3M4 battled their way past the Imperial Guard into the Emperor's throne room. Scourge beheaded Yari as Revan engaged with the Emperor himself. Vitiate tried his old trick of overwhelming Revan's mind with his telekinetic powers, but failed. During the duel, Revan opened himself up to both the light and dark sides of the Force, releasing the energy in its purest form and sending the Emperor flying backward. This was a fascinating use of power because he transcended the teachings of the Jedi and the Sith. Then Revan charged with his lightsaber at the Emperor, who responded with blasts of Force lightning. The Jedi deflected one bolt back into the Emperor's chest, enraging him. Vitiate then unleashed a massive barrage of lightning that burned Revan's face under his mask. T3M4 saved his master by distracting the Emperor with his flamethrower, but Vitiate simply blasted him apart to Revan's devastation. Then he picked up Revan's lightsaber and planned to strike him down with his own blade, but Mitra reacted quickly. She flung her own lit saber at the Emperor, knocking Revan's out of his hands. The Emperor believed it was all over, and expressed his disappointment in Scourge in particular. Just when it appeared they had defeated Vitiate against all the odds, Scourge received a Force vision of a Jedi defeating the Emperor. Crucially, this Jedi wasn't either Revan or Mitra, so Scourge did what he thought would bring about this destiny. He stabbed Mitra in the back, stunning Revan in his betrayal and allowing the Emperor to overwhelm the Jedi with his lightning. Revan was no stranger to suffering, but he was about to experience the next 300 years in a psychological prison. First, Vitiate tested Scourge's resolve by ordering him to kill the Jedi, but ordered him to stand down before the traitor could complete the act. Scourge then convinced the Emperor that he was on his side all along. He should have been a Sabak player, not a Sith Lord. Anyway, Vitiate bought this and even gave Scourge the awesome promotion of becoming the Emperor's Wrath, possibly the coolest job title ever. Things were about to get worse for Revan because the Emperor locked him in a special prison in the middle of the Maelstrom Nebula. The role-playing game Riders of the Maelstrom describes this spatial anomaly as a huge green cloud of charged space dust and raw energy that altered navigational coordinates and confused computers. In sum, this was bad news for Revan because nobody was coming to save him quickly this time. Meanwhile, Revan found himself locked in stasis as the Emperor linked his mind to his own, drawing on his knowledge of the Republic and the Force. However, there was one aspect that the Emperor neither predicted nor discovered. The Force ghost of the slain Mitra Surik still lingered and lent her old friend the strength to resist the Emperor's psychological domination. Vitiate used Revan as a conduit to see visions of the future as he plotted galactic domination. Revan was able to manipulate this link by inhibiting Vitiate's aggression and reducing his desire to invade the Republic. However, sometimes events occur in the galaxy that nobody foresees. You may remember back to the Jedi Civil War when Darth Revan experimented on a fragment of the Star Forge and created the Infinite Engine. This was a device of unbelievable power that could create anything that it desired, from air to food to life itself. The Old Republic game reveals that Revan left it in the care of his Ongri slaves and ordered them to offer some of their children to the engine. This sacrifice would impart some of its power to the Ongri and allow their culture to continue its existence. Perhaps unsurprisingly, this resulted in the development of a cult of Revan worshippers. Meanwhile, an Order of Revan shot up on Dromenkas. Their members believed in his balancing of the light and dark sides of the Force, and believed that he had actually defeated and replaced the Emperor. These followers became known as the Revanites and would play a significant role in events to come. In 3681 BBY, the hidden Sith Empire finally invaded the Republic in a conflict that lasted for over 30 years. It would end with the Treaty of Coruscant, which was a ceasefire on paper, but really signaled the Republic's capitulation after losing massive chunks of territory. A Cold War began, but then the situation began to escalate again in 3642 BBY. That's when Mitra Surik's ghost reached out to the Jedi Master Oteg and alerted him to Revan's presence in the Maelstrom Nebula. Oteg was a powerful Jedi and a member of the same unknown species as Vandar Tok'er and Yoda. He was also a very effective space warfare commander. Oteg led an astonishing rescue of Revan, releasing him from his prison and freeing him from stasis. You might think that this would please the Jedi after 300 years of agonizing captivity, but he was horrified because he knew of Vitiate's ambitions and believed that he was the only one holding the Emperor back. However, in the Old Republic game, Mitra appeared to him again and told him that they had to free him before his strength failed anyway. Obsession overcame Revan as he focused on taking down the Emperor through whatever means necessary. Initially, he rejected the Order of Revan because he didn't wish to abandon the Jedi ways, nor did he see himself as a prophet. Instead, he decided to hunt down his old assassin droid, HK-47, who still existed centuries after his construction. Then he went to the Foundry, a hidden Rakatan space station he had found long ago but kept a secret. The Old Republic Codex describes the Foundry as a technological marvel in the forgotten Nanthri system. Built into an asteroid, it was essentially a factory with at least 12 levels. The Foundry used tractor beams to lock onto nearby asteroids, so it had almost endless raw materials for mass production. It was similar in concept to the Star Forge on a much smaller scale and minus the evil side effects. Revan used it to create a massive army of assassin droids with the mission of destroying anyone with pure-blood Sith blood. However, the Sith Empire thwarted his plan by capturing a Republic cruiser and using it to bypass a blockade around the Foundry. The Sith strike team fought their way through the station, even defeating HK-47, although it wasn't the end of the assassin droid. Finally, the Sith entered Revan's inner sanctum and fought him in another intense duel. He wielded his violet lightsaber and donned his mask for this final showdown. Ultimately, they defeated him, but before they could strike him down, he recounted Malik's last words and then vanished in a flash of violent energy. This all takes place in the Old Republic game, and it's epic. If you're thinking that's an anticlimactic way for this story to end, don't worry, it's not over yet. As Revan died, he attempted to become one with the Force, but he was only partially successful. The light side of his being moved on, but the devastating dark side lingered and was left in control of his body. This version of Revan was completely insane and driven only by the goal of finally destroying the Emperor, regardless of the consequences. But first, he planned to destroy both the Republic and the Sith Empire because he believed they were impeding his plans. By this point, we know from the Old Republic that another unnamed Jedi Knight had defeated Vitiate in combat, but the Emperor's spirit lingered and had retreated to Yavin 4 to recover its strength. Revan decided to take control of the Order of Revan, purging its membership while recruiting high-ranking figures from the Sith and the Republic. Suddenly, the Revanites were a powerful force in the galaxy. He also decided that he wasn't finished with Rakatan technology and used stolen artifacts to design his new infinite army. This didn't work very well though, because Revan's actions had the shocking effect of unifying the Sith and the Republic into the most unlikely alliance in galactic history. They attacked the Infinite Army project and wiped it out in a major setback, which forced Revan to hire the Nova Blades pirate gang to prey on their patrols. Revan wreaked chaos with his efforts, but very few of them actually worked. He did have some success at Rishi when the Revanites gathered a fleet that attacked the Alliance and sabotaged enemy ships. There was also the surreal capture and escape of Revan's actual descendant, Theron Shan, whom he tried and failed to convince to join his cause. Finally, the former Sith Lord and Jedi Master brought his plans to crush Vitiate forward. He invaded Yavin 4 with a massive force that overwhelmed the Imperial Guardsmen on the planet. The Revanites secured the Temple of Sacrifice, which contained the mechanism to repeat the ritual that Vitiate performed on Nathema, draining all life for his power. Revan actually planned to bring the Emperor back at the cost of every living being on Yavin 4, including his own followers, because he believed he could defeat Vitiate in a duel. The Republic and the Sith mutually agreed that this was the dumbest idea in the universe, and that they had to stop the evil Revan before it was too late. This Dark Revan didn't realize that his light side had appeared as a Force spirit to the leaders of the Alliance. Light Revan revealed the truth of Dark Revan's being, warning them of what they faced. Fortunately, the Coalition was able to stop Revan from completing the ritual and destroying the temple machinery. The Dark Revan then retreated to another temple deeper in the jungle, where the Emperor's spirit lay hidden. However, this wasn't the end of the battle, because the Coalition's most powerful leaders pursued him. They included Jedi Grand Master Satele Shan and Theron, both of whom were his descendants. Dark Revan refused to give up because the only thing driving him was his compulsion to destroy the Emperor. However, despite defeating several opponents in combat, he ultimately lost the battle. Then he heard the Emperor's mocking laughter because the death and suffering on Yavin 4 gave his spirit the strength to flee the planet. There was nothing left for Dark Revan to achieve. His light side appeared to him and convinced him to reunite and restore balance. Before the end, the newly whole Revan revealed the Emperor's return and warned the surviving Coalition members to remain vigilant. Then his physical body faded, leaving behind his mask, robes, and lightsaber as he became one with the Force. There's one last chapter to this story. Revan was at peace, but his spirit remained attuned to events in the galaxy. Vitiate reincarnated as Valkorion, Emperor of the Eternal Empire. This was an entirely separate entity that Vitiate had been building in secret for centuries. He cast off the shackles of the Sith by proclaiming himself the Infinite Emperor and planned to remold the galaxy in his vision. In 3636 BBY, his sons Arcan and Thexan invaded the galaxy, testing the waters before an attack on Korriban. This led to Thexan's death and culminated in a full-scale conflict known as the Third Galactic War. We see this in the Knights of the Fallen Empire expansion of the Old Republic. I won't go too deep into that war now because it was a massive sprawling event, and this video is about Revan. However, if we jump forward to 3626 BBY, Revan's spirit returned. He guided the unknown commander of the Eternal Alliance, the Jedi Kira Carson, and his old frenemy Scourge through a ship containing the unconscious bodies of Satele Shan and her students. These Jedi succumbed to a curse that only those who had been under Valkorion's control could endure. Just for reference, Carson fell into this category because she was a former child of the Emperor. I don't mean that in a literal biological sense, but rather that she escaped from a cult of Force-sensitive children whom the Emperor indoctrinated for his purposes. Revan's returned spirit refused to rest until Valkorion was gone for good. He got his wish because he played a crucial role in the final showdown between the Alliance commander and the Emperor. Their insane battle took place inside Jedi Master Satele Shan's mind. Revan assisted the commander in defeating the three main aspects of the Emperor's being. These were his Sith Emperor identity, Vitiate, the Eternal Emperor Valkorion, and finally the pureblood Sith Tenebrae. When the commander finally confronted Tenebrae, all of the Emperor's manipulated and murdered victims materialized, helping the hero in the ensuing battle. Finally, Revan achieved his purpose of defeating an evil that dogged the galaxy for almost 2 millennia, and he became one with the Force. Revan is one of the most fascinating figures in Star Wars because he's such a complicated figure. His relationship with the Force is one of extremes, and he also displays many of the flaws that fractured the Jedi Order years later. There's a point where he's almost a gray Jedi in the mold of Ahsoka Tano as he refuses to bend to the strict, rigid teachings of the Jedi Order. It's also worth noting that at no point is Revan truly evil. Yes, he commits many evil acts, but even as a Sith, their essence wasn't out of pure lust for power or domination like Vitiate or Darth Sidious. He drifted toward darkness after his exposure to Sith artifacts and centers corrupted him. But he believed he was saving the galaxy. Then Vitiate broke his mind, turning him into a Sith Lord. Also, don't forget that it wasn't the whole Revan that led the Revanites into committing acts of ruthless brutality against the Republic and the Sith. This was his splintered mind. And again, he believed he was saving the galaxy. This doesn't excuse his actions, but it does frame him as more of a tragic figure who endured centuries of physical and mental torture before he was finally able to rest. Ultimately, he played a crucial role in bringing down arguably the most powerful Sith Lord in Star Wars history. He also made the sacrifice of leaving behind his beloved family for the good of the galaxy, and that shows his true nature more than anything else.
Oh, and again, for a limited time, every Stickman saber purchase comes with 2 additional combat sabers, so you're more than ready for your own duels. If that sounds like something you'd want to look into, the link's in the description.